Imagine paying luxury steakhouse prices for just a simple basket of fish and chips from a corner shop. But then, on the exact same day, a tech company casually raises $26 billion in a matter of hours. Welcome to Financial Candy for Friday, July 10th, 2026. Usually when we look at the financial landscape, there is some kind of unifying story like a dominant narrative that ties the whole global economy together.
Right, but as of today, the market absolutely does not have one single tidy through line.
No, not at all. We're watching distinct economic pressures moving in completely opposite directions. I mean, on one side, you've got the mega cap AI and tech sector swimming in billions of dollars of new capital, massive infrastructure buildouts, and literal high stakes corporate espionage.
And then on the other side, the everyday consumer economy is visibly hitting a brick wall. So our mission today is to unpack the mechanics of both those realities. We are going to look at the biggest foreign IPO in U.S. history and the bizarre hidden math risks attached to it.
Plus, we'll get into the weird financial overlap between stablecoins and semiconductor exports.
Exactly. And finally, we will break down the brutal supply chain math that explains why that simple, everyday fast food meal is suddenly priced like a luxury item, and the strange lengths consumers are going to survive the squeeze.
So let us start at the top end of the market, which is operating in a reality entirely its own right now. We have to look at what happened in the market debut on Friday with SK Hynix.
Right, the South Korean memory chip maker. They are an absolute linchpin in the global AI supply chain.
Yeah, they raised $26.5 billion in a U.S. NASDAQ listing, and the shares surged 17% right out of the gate. The underlying demand is intensely hot, but the ripple effect is what really stands out here. We are seeing this explosion of single-stock leveraged ETFs tied to companies like SK Hynix.
Issued by firms like Granite Shares and ProShares, yeah.
Yeah.
Regulators are watching this mechanism closely because it shifts the entire purpose of an exchange-traded fund. I mean, historically, ETFs were low-cost vehicles for broad, boring index investing.
You buy the whole market and just sit on it for 20 years.
Yes, but now they're being weaponized for concentrated leverage. The appeal's obvious, right? If you assume a chip stock is only going up, you buy a 2x leveraged ETF and you double your gains.
Sounds great in theory, but I'm guessing the math breaks down somewhere.
It does. The internal math of these products introduces a massive amount of hidden systemic risk. It is a mechanism called net asset value decay, or volatility drag.
Okay, stop right there and walk me through that math, because if I am super confident in SK Hynix and I buy a 2x leveraged ETF on their stock, I expect my returns to just mirror the stock, just doubled. If the stock ultimately goes up over a month, how could I possibly still lose money?
Well, it comes down to daily resets. These funds rebalance their leverage every single day, which forces you to deal with the unforgiving math of compounding percentages. Think of it like trying to climb a slippery, shrinking hill. Imagine the underlying stock starts at $100 and your 2x ETF also starts at $100.
Okay, I'm with you so far. $100 each, so no leverage advantage yet.
Now, on day one, the market gets spooked and the stock drops 10%. It is now at $90. Your 2x ETF drops 20%. You are down to $80.
Right, I took double the hit, which is exactly the risk I signed up for with a 2x fund.
But here's the catch. On day two, the stock recovers. It rallies by about 11%, taking it from $90 back up to roughly $100. So the underlying asset is completely flat over 2 days.
Meaning a normal investor basically just broke even.
Exactly. But for your ETF, an 11% gain doubled is 22%. The issue is you are applying that 22% gain to a depleted base of $80. Increasing $80 by 22% only gets you to $97.60.
Oh, wow. So the underlying stock fully recovered to 100, but I actually lost $2.40.
Yes. If you buy a leveraged ETF and hold it through weeks of choppy, volatile trading, that daily decay compounds. The ground shrinks under your feet.
What?
Regulators are worried because retail investors are using these as long-term holds, completely unaware that the daily rebalancing mechanism is actively chewing up their capital.
So the product is mathematically designed for short-term day trading, but it is being marketed to people looking for long-term AI exposure. Now, while retail money chases that leverage, Apple is playing a totally different, highly optimized game. And their stock is hitting record highs as a result.
Right, because for months, the market punished Apple for supposedly missing the AI boat.
Right.
Now they are actively avoiding what everyone calls the token maxing arms race. They aren't spending tens of billions of dollars to build frontier models from scratch.
Yeah, instead they opted for token optimization. They partnered with Google to license the Gemini models to power the new Siri. Wall Street is rewarding the sheer capital efficiency of that move. Apple essentially decided to let someone else burn the billions required for data centers and compute power.
It protects their massive free cash flow. Their real advantage was never going to be having this single smartest raw AI model in a vacuum. Their advantage is the 1.5 billion iPhones already sitting in people's pockets. They just need to integrate an efficient AI with the highly personal, localized data on a device you already trust.
But the flip side of this optimization strategy is incredibly aggressive. Apple just sued OpenAI in federal court for trade secret theft. This is a massive reversal from the cooperative tone we saw earlier in the year.
It really is. Apple alleges that OpenAI used Jony Ive's new hardware firm, I.O. Products, to systematically poach Apple hardware talent. They specifically named former Apple Vice President Tang Tan in the filing.
Yeah, and the lawsuit claims OpenAI went as far as having candidates bring actual physical Apple prototype parts to these show-and-tell interview sessions just to extract confidential manufacturing IP.
OpenAI is facing a strategic bottleneck right now. They have world-class software, but to truly capture the value of artificial intelligence, they need a proprietary consumer device. You cannot control the user experience if you are merely an app living inside Apple's ecosystem.
So the allegations suggest OpenAI is taking severe shortcuts to leapfrog the decade of hardware R&D required to build a phone or a wearable.
Exactly. Apple is drawing a hard line, signaling they will share software revenues. But any attempt to replicate their physical supply chain secrets will result in a scorched earth legal battle.
It is like a restaurant outsourcing its expensive kitchen operations to a rival, which makes financial sense, but then you catch that same rival in the parking lot trying to steal your front-of-house maître to open a competing spot.
Yeah.
You're going to file a lawsuit immediately.
The physical hardware is the ultimate moat. And actually, connecting this hardware battle to the bigger geopolitical picture, the fight for chips and infrastructure is spilling directly into sovereign wealth. Earlier this week, the U.S. Commerce Department moved toward easing AI chip export controls for the United Arab Emirates.
Specifically giving favorable review status to massive UAE-backed tech investment firms like MGX and G42, allowing them faster access to advanced U.S. semiconductors.
Right. And this brings us to a truly bizarre financial mechanism causing friction in Washington. MGX recently made a $2 billion investment into the massive crypto exchange Binance. But they did not wire traditional fiat currency.
No, they executed the investment using a stablecoin called USD1, which is issued by World Liberty Financial, an entity affiliated with the Trump family. Market data showed this specific transaction generated roughly $515 million in crypto revenue for the issuer.
And Senate Democrats are now demanding hearings to investigate if this financial mechanism is acting as a backdoor lever influencing U.S. trade policy. The political optics are dominating the headlines, but the underlying financial mechanism is what demands attention.
Right, because how does simply moving $2 billion generate $500 million in revenue? It seems like money printing.
It comes down to the yield on stablecoin reserves. When a sovereign wealth fund buys $2 billion worth of a stablecoin, they hand over real fiat currency. The stablecoin issuer takes those real dollars and buys U.S. treasuries. Currently, short-term treasuries yield around 5%. The issuer just keeps that interest.
So over time, managing a massive float of billions of dollars generates incredible risk-free yield. We are seeing digital tokens utilized at the sovereign wealth level to execute multi-billion-dollar geopolitical investments, proving that the stablecoin architecture is no longer an experimental fringe project.
It is operating at the core of global finance. And speaking of operating at the core, we just saw a massive regulatory milestone on Friday. Circle, the issuer of the USDC stablecoin, which has over $73 billion in circulation, received approval from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency to operate as a national trust bank.
They are officially launching Circle National Trust, and the stock surged 5% on the news. Getting a national trust charter shifts Circle from being perceived as a high-risk financial app into being foundational government-recognized financial infrastructure.
That is a massive shift in institutional trust.
I have to challenge the actual utility of this for a moment, though. If Circle is already just holding dollars and treasury bills in reserve to back their digital tokens, why do they need a national trust bank charter? Aren't they just putting a crypto paint job on a traditional bank? What does this actually change for the plumbing of the system?
It changes the entire regulatory surface area. Before this approval, Circle had to rely on a patchwork of third-party traditional banks to hold the cash backing their tokens. More critically, without a federal charter, Crypto firms operate as state-licensed money transmitters.
Oh, meaning they had to deal with 50 different state-level regulators, 50 different compliance departments, and 50 sets of rules just to operate across the United States.
Exactly. Getting a national charter consolidates all of that under one federal regulator. They can manage their reserves directly at the Federal Reserve level, bypass the state-by-state friction, and significantly lower their operating costs.
Yeah.
It is the plumbing of the future economy being institutionalized.
We're essentially watching digital rails replace physical friction. And for more deep context on the systems and plumbing running our world, you can find Financial Candy, Brain Candy, and classic audiobooks at clarineratio.com. Now, we need to contrast those frictionless digital billions with the high-friction physical world that is actively crushing the everyday consumer.
Yeah, because this week, PepsiCo missed its earnings estimates, and CEO Ramon Laguarta specifically pointed to severe consumer budget tightening.
The earnings miss is a direct consequence of the geopolitical tensions pushing up energy costs. In late May, due to the U.S.-Iran war, the national average for gas prices hit $4.56 a gallon. When a consumer spends an extra $20 just to fill their tank so they can get to work, the very first thing they cut from their budget is the impulse purchase inside the convenience store.
The convenience store economics rely entirely on the gas pump acting as a lure. The gas gets you on the property, but the margin is made on the soda and the chips. Pepsi tried to fight this demand destruction, cutting prices on Lay's, Tostitos, and Doritos by up to 15% back in February.
And even with those drastic price cuts, their North American beverage volume still dropped 4%. When energy prices bite, the consumer wall is absolute. The frustration for consumers is compounded by the fact that retail fuel markets are incredibly inefficient. In the UK right now, there is an 11 pence gap, which translates to about 15 US cents per liter between gas stations located just a few miles apart.
The inefficiency stems from two distinct mechanisms. First, you have inventory pricing dynamics. Larger forecourts often buy their oil futures in bulk weeks in advance, locking in a specific price to hedge against volatility. Smaller, independent stations might be buying at the daily fluctuating spot rate. Their underlying cost basis is entirely different on any given Tuesday.
What is the second mechanism?
It is a massive data compliance failure. UK retailers are legally mandated to update their live pricing on the government's Fuel Finder database within 30 minutes of any price change.
We have AI models that can generate software code in seconds, but gas station operators are simply flouting a legal mandate to upload a text file with their prices. They refuse to participate in the database, which intentionally removes the consumer's ability to seamlessly comparison shop. It forces drivers to burn expensive gas driving around town just to find cheaper gas.
The squeeze is everywhere. If you want the ultimate index for everyday physical inflation, look at British fish and chips. The average cost of a portion of cod and chips is now £11 and 41 pence, which is roughly 15 US dollars.
The breakdown of that $15 price tag reveals the brutal math of the modern supply chain. About 35% of that cost goes strictly to the food itself. That raw material cost spiked because over 50% of the whitefish coming into the UK was traditionally Russian caught.
Right, and new tariffs and import bans completely severed that supply line, forcing shops to source from much more expensive Norwegian or Icelandic fleets.
Then another 40% goes to labor and staffing. That leaves just a 25% sliver of revenue to cover packaging, rent, and the massive surging energy costs required to run commercial deep fryers all day. Running a deep fryer is essentially running a high-wattage industrial heater for 12 hours straight.
When you look at those margin constraints, the fact that these shops haven't all closed is a minor economic miracle. Consumers are feeling this exact same constraint, and because people still want to live their lives and take summer vacations, they are adopting extreme behavioral adaptations. Families are utilizing platforms like Home Exchange and Kindred to execute direct home swaps.
Like you stay in my apartment in London, and I stay in your house in Copenhagen. Families are saving up to £6,000, or roughly 8,000 US dollars, on a single holiday simply by zeroing out the accommodation line item.
The psychological friction of letting a complete stranger sleep in your bed and use your kitchen used to limit this behavior to a tiny niche of travelers. Today, the economic incentive of an $8,000 savings is powerful enough to bulldoze right through that psychological barrier. People are locking their valuables in a closet, clearing out a drawer, and adapting to the scarcity.
You definitely see the darker side of this scarcity mindset when you scroll through social media right now, though. Tight budgets make consumers desperate for a bargain, which opens the door for exploitation. With temperatures rising across Europe, consumers are being bombarded by slick, AI-generated online ads on platforms like TikTok and Instagram selling $100 portable air conditioners.
They claim to be NASA engineered and promise to drop the temperature of a living room in 90 seconds. If you buy one, you realize you have been entirely scammed. The fundamental physics of these devices are flawed for the climates they are targeting. They're not air conditioners.
A real air conditioner uses chemical refrigerants and a mechanical compressor to remove both heat and moisture from the air. These $100 devices are just swamp coolers.
Yeah, they use a small fan to blow room temperature air over wet cardboard pads. In a bone-dry desert, evaporating water absorbs heat through the latent heat of vaporization, which can lower the air temperature slightly. But in an already humid climate like the UK, the air cannot absorb much more moisture.
So the device just pumps more water vapor into a humid room, making it feel heavier, stickier, and objectively more uncomfortable. They sell the illusion of relief to people who cannot afford a $500 real AC unit. Zooming out from the household level, multinational corporations are navigating these exact same physical world constraints through aggressive regulatory and infrastructure arbitrage. Look at the airline industry. EasyJet just agreed in principle to a roughly $7.6 billion takeover bid from the U.S. private equity firm Apollo.
And Apollo is not paying $7.6 billion for a fleet of aging Airbus jets. They are buying the intangible infrastructure assets. EasyJet holds highly coveted takeoff and landing slots at severely congested European airports like Gatwick and Paris-Charles de Gaulle.
In a regulatory environment where governments refuse to pour concrete for new runways due to environmental concerns, the existing landing slots become incredibly valuable finite assets. We see that exact tension between environmental regulation and physical infrastructure at the Port of Rotterdam, too. It is the largest freight port in Europe, and its industrial cluster emits roughly 29 million tons of CO2 annually.
The Port Authority is currently facing a major lawsuit from an environmental group called Advocates for the Future, demanding a legally binding plan to drastically cut those emissions and phase out fossil fuels. The Rotterdam lawsuit perfectly illustrates the limits of regional regulation in a globalized economy.
Because the Port Authority is actively trying to transition by building hydrogen hubs and carbon capture systems. However, if a regional court forces the port to impose severe, immediate emission caps, multinational chemical and oil firms will simply find the new operating costs untenable.
They will not lower their global emissions. They will just pack up and move their refining operations to jurisdictions in Asia or the US, where regulations are looser and energy is cheaper. It is a game of industrial musical chairs. Regulatory arbitrage does not reduce the global carbon footprint. It merely shifts the carbon output to a different part of the map.
Whether you are Apple partnering with Google to avoid burning billions on data centers, a family swapping homes with a stranger in Denmark to afford a vacation, or a massive industrial port trying to balance green regulations without driving all its tenants to foreign competitors, the core financial reality of July 2026 is adaptation. Everyone is utilizing whatever arbitrage they can find to squeeze maximum value out of a highly constrained system.
And the contrast between our two stories today leaves us with a critical question regarding systemic vulnerability. We are watching stablecoins evolve into federally regulated trust banks, and we are relying on digital databases just to find the cheapest gallon of gas. We are increasingly placing immense trust in frictionless digital infrastructure to save us from the inflation, scarcity, and friction of the physical world.
Which puts an incredible amount of pressure on those digital systems to never fail.
Exactly. The looming threat we must consider is what happens when that digital infrastructure itself becomes too highly leveraged.
That's Financial Candy for Friday. We'll be back on Monday. If you need something to listen to while you pack your bags for your home swap, check out Brain Candy this weekend.